dive. Today, we're really wading into some complicated territory. We're looking at that place where, immense reality stardom just crashes headfirst into deeply personal heartbreak. And it's all happening right as the entire world is watching.
It's more than just a collision, isn't it?
Oh.
It's a fundamental conflict of identity. When you have a public figure, especially someone like Kandi Burruss, who has built her entire career, her whole brand, her businesses, everything, on this idea of transparency, on broadcasting the inner workings of her life. And then suddenly she faces a genuine, deeply painful private crisis. The rules of the game just completely shift.
The rules totally change. The audience expects the show to just keep going, but the person at the center of it just needs a minute. They need to grieve.
And that's the core tension right there.
That is exactly the core tension we're exploring today. So we've taken the sources you share with us about the very recent split between Kandi Burruss, the mogul, the Grammy winner, ex-Gay Real Housewives of Atlanta alum, and her husband of 11 years, the producer Todd Tucker.
Right. Our mission today is to go past the headlines and really extract the nuanced story. What does it actually look like, moment by moment, to manage that kind of profound, private grief under the most intense, unrelenting public scrutiny?
Well, the source material we have here it's fascinating because it's so fresh. And it's also so transactional. We're not dealing with some carefully scripted press release that's been vetted by a dozen publicists.
No, not at all.
Instead, what we have are Kandi's own words, given during a highly visible, but also, commercially motivated appearance. Specifically, it was an Amazon live stream. She was promoting her online store, and this was less than a week after the legal filing for divorce.
So we're getting this raw snapshot. We see her immediate emotional state, her very calculated commitment to co-parenting, and I think most crucially, her frustration with the instant public narrative that she's so desperate to get a handle on. Exactly.
Yeah.
What's remarkable here is that we're not just reading a formal announcement. We are witnessing a famous woman attempting, in real time, to define her own pain. She's trying to do it before the media narrative, before the social media speculation, and, before her own reality TV legacy just swallows that pain whole.
And the focus becomes so starkly on the contrast, right? The celebrity expectation is that everything, especially conflict, has to be shared. It's content. But the personal reality, her reality, is that this particular crisis is just too painful, too intimate, and maybe too destructive to share.
Well, think about it. She spent more than a decade living under the mandate of Bravo, a world where sharing everything, including those moments of profound upset, of tears, was literally a condition of her employment.
It was part of the job description.
It was the job. And now, facing the definitive end of the marriage that really defined her last decade of fame, she is expressing this firm, almost desperate need for total privacy. That attempt to pull back so quickly, build a boundary where, frankly, one never really existed before, that's not just a personal choice. It is the central conflict of her career and her personal life colliding.
Okay, let's unpack this timeline first, because the legal filing itself, that seemed to be the public starting gun for this drama. It sent these immediate shockwaves across the whole reality television landscape.
It really did.
So Kandi Burruss filed for divorce from Todd Tucker. They were married for 11 years. She's 49, he's 52. And what makes this whole situation so high pressure is that the interview we have the excerpts from, the one on Amazon Live, while promoting the Kandi shop, was conducted less than a week after that legal document hit the courts.
And that gap, between the final legal action and the public finding out, it's more than just a matter of days. It's a chasm. For the public, for us, the divorce is instantaneous news. A headline pops up. But the filing itself is always just a deeply private, administrative culmination of months, maybe even years, of internal struggle, of negotiation, of emotional turmoil.
Right. The public got the news on a Monday, let's say, but Kandi and Todd had been living the reality of the separation for much, much longer.
Far longer.
And she addressed that. She talked directly about the sense of public shock, which I think is vital. She said that while the split was a surprise to many of her fans and followers who, only saw the shiny outside, she personally saw it coming for a while and confirmed it had been brewing for a while.
That phrase, brewing for a while, is so incredibly significant because it completely deconstructs the assumption of some sudden tragedy that the audience felt. For people who followed their every post or saw them at a recent appearance, it's a powerful correction to the public record.
It is.
It confirms that the dissolution of their partnership wasn't one catastrophic event. It was a slow internal erosion, a gradual recognition that, the relationship had just run its course.
It challenges that common assumption we all make, doesn't it? The audience assumes that because they saw photos of them smiling together at a grand opening or on a family vacation last month.
Yeah, they look so happy.
Exactly. So the split must have happened last week. But Kandi is explicitly telling us no. The external public timeline of a celebrity relationship is dramatically different from the private emotional truth lived behind closed doors.
Precisely. And we have to remember, the celebrity public facade is built on maintaining an image of stability, especially for a relationship that was foundational to Kandi's reality television identity for a whole decade. Their wedding was a storyline, their children were introduced on camera, their businesses, like Old Lady Gang, are literally built on the family narrative.
So internally, while they were fulfilling all these public obligations, the partners themselves were likely navigating this brewing period, this phase of quiet recognition, maybe some counseling attempts, and just a gradual acceptance that the relationship was unsustainable.
And the divorce filing is just the administrative final step. The emotional end often happened long before the lawyers ever got involved.
And, given their whole infrastructure, you have to recognize the sheer physical difficulty of just winding down their shared life. They didn't just share a house.
Oh, no.
They share children, a massive joint business portfolio, and an entire brand built on their union. That kind of shared life doesn't just dissolve overnight in a fit of rage. It requires logistical deconstruction over time.
Absolutely. And that need for quiet logistical planning is probably a secondary factor that contributes to the brewing.
Yeah.
They had to navigate shared assets, multiple businesses, complex co-parenting discussions, all before the final could even become public knowledge. If they had waited until the emotional damage was, at its peak and they were openly hostile, these administrative and financial separations would have been impossible to manage amicably.
So that brewing period was actually essential prep time.
It was.
Yeah.
For both the legal process and for their public narrative.
So the initial public surprise is really just a testament to how successful Kandi and Todd were at maintaining that perfect, polished, profitable image, even as things were falling apart behind the scenes. And that maintenance of the brand is what takes us right back to the context of where she chose to make these comments.
The context is everything here. Kandi Burruss isn't just a former reality star. She's a massive commercial brand. RHOA alum, Grammy winner, Escape alum. She has appeared on a half-dozen spinoffs. Her career is just so deeply intertwined with her personal identity and her visibility.
And she made these incredibly raw personal statements during an Amazon Live segment, a live stream that was dedicated entirely to promoting and selling merchandise for her online store, the Kandi Shop.
And that collision it's deeply jarring. But it's also the reality of modern celebrity. She is standing on a virtual stage with the primary professional obligation of selling products and engaging commercially, while simultaneously confirming the deepest personal crisis she's experienced in a decade. There is no off switch for her professional life, even when her emotional life is in shambles.
This just perfectly illustrates the modern celebrity mandate, doesn't it? The show must go on and it must be monetized, even when your world is collapsing. The professional obligation to sell products, to maintain visibility, and to monetize her platform forces her to blend her deepest personal crisis with commercial activity.
Which means there is no true separation. There's no time out for grief that doesn't also involve a transaction.
Right. She uses the interview to sell clothes, but she has to pay the emotional price of sharing her divorce just to maintain the engagement.
And you could argue she's essentially weaponizing her crisis to manage her brand. She's sacrificing a small piece of privacy in a commercial setting to gain control over the larger, potentially damaging narrative. And that blending of commerce and crisis is precisely what creates this immense psychological strain, which is what we really need to analyze next.
Okay, so she's on the Amazon Live selling the shop, and she shifts very honestly to describing her emotional state during this turbulent period. She says it's all over the place and up and down, noting that going through a divorce is definitely not the easiest thing.
That immediate honesty, that admission of being emotionally volatile and up and down, that's the first real crack in the brave face facade. It just underscores the amplified stress of the situation.
Yeah.
And we really cannot overlook the timing. She specifically mentions this trauma is happening as the major holiday season kicks off.
Oh, the holidays. That adds an entirely different layer of strain. I mean, divorce is one of the most stressful life events anyone can go through. But combining the divorce proceedings, the legal, the financial, the emotional severing, with a time that is traditionally focused so intensely on family unity, on tradition, on celebration, it just significantly increases the psychological pressure.
It creates an almost impossible expectation. How do you even begin the painful process of deconstructing family traditions when you're forced to start immediately, right before Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's?
Hmm.
The culture demands this pervasive holiday cheer, but internally she's navigating profound loss.
And the pressure to maintain normalcy for her children, which I know we'll get into, is just immense, especially against that backdrop. She can't just postpone the grief until January. She has to perform while she's grieving.
She does.
So how is she coping with this mandated performance? She noted changing up her routine to distract herself. She said, sometimes you're cool, you're moving, you're mixing, you're moving, you're hanging out with friends. I mean, that sounds like the standard playbook for dealing with immense stress, right? Activities, socialization, anything to avoid quiet reflection.
It is a very common and frankly necessary immediate coping strategy, movement and distraction. When the internal pain, the grief, the regret, the uncertainty is overwhelming, keeping busy, mixing, moving provides temporary crucial relief. It's a mechanism to manage the emotional tidal wave so it doesn't just drown her entirely.
But I have to ask, for someone whose job demands constant movement, constant monetization, constant visibility, does that mean true deep emotional processing is structurally impossible for her right now? Is the mixing and moving actually her only available form of therapy? Or is it just a mandated deferral of her grief?
I think that's the crux of the celebrity experience. When you're dealing with intense grief, distraction is necessary for short-term survival, yes, but it rarely replaces the necessary internal processing required for genuine healing. For most people, you take a sabbatical, you close the door. In Kandi's case, the professional demands, the Amazon Live, the business obligations, the sheer force of her brand, which requires constant content, make constant movement almost mandatory.
She literally does not have the luxury of disappearing for 6 months.
Not at all. She has to monetize her platform, and that relentless activity becomes her distraction, ensuring the grief stays deferred. She is, at least in the short term, prioritizing the stability of her brand over the stability of her emotional health.
And this is where she draws a hard line around her right to privacy. She connects it directly to her deep-seated identity in a really fascinating way. She explicitly linked her need for privacy and solitude to her astrology, saying, me being the Taurus that I am, I like to keep those moments to myself.
That is such a sophisticated psychological move. She's using a core, fixed aspect of her personality, her zodiac sign, which is traditionally associated with stability, with groundedness, resistance to change, as a firm, non-negotiable defense mechanism against public intrusion. She's effectively saying, this desire for privacy isn't a temporary mood. It is fundamentally who I am, and it conflicts with the job I used to do.
And when you look at the characteristics of a Taurus, they prioritize security. They thrive in stable environments. They view their home and their internal life as a sanctuary. The demands of reality television, which thrive on chaos and external exposure, are completely antithetical to that nature.
Exactly. The decision to air her life on RHOA for over a decade was a professional calculation. It required her to override her natural disposition. Now, facing true existential chaos in her private life, that inherent Taurus need for sanctuary and stability is surging back to protect her. It's her natural instinct fighting against the imposed identity of the reality star.
And she draws this perfect, just devastating contrast with her past on reality TV. She says, when I was on Housewives, I really couldn't keep moments to myself when I got upset, so y'all would catch me crying. But real life, my everyday life, I don't really like for those moments to be shared with the world.
And that is the ultimate distinction, isn't it? The distinction between the carefully managed, edited, and profitable performance of grief and the raw, unmonitored, actual experience. On Bravo, her sadness was fodder for a storyline. It was framed, it was edited, it was scored with music, and presented for maximum viewer engagement and ratings.
It was a product, an emotional currency.
It was. But the sadness she's experiencing now, the moments of sadness she mentions, are the raw, unedited, potentially ugly kind, the kind she strongly wishes to protect and process privately. She is articulating the immense challenge of a public figure trying to reclaim their right to private, unedited, and therefore authentic grief. She's trying to decommoditize her own pain.
It's the difference between crying for the cameras on a couch during a staged argument, which is designed for a narrative,
Right.
and crying alone in your kitchen at 3 a.m. when the cameras are truly off. One serves the narrative, the other is just pure, unprotected life.
And this transition from a reality star who must share everything to a divorcee who needs to share nothing is incredibly fraught. Because the public feels entitled to the full story. Her relationship, her family's start, was documented on Kandi's wedding and all those spin-offs. Now she is fighting tooth and nail to stop the camera from filming the final, most painful scene. It is a profound effort to separate the woman who needs to mourn from the brand that needs to profit.
This struggle between that professional performance and her internal reality, it leads directly into the difficult truth she revealed in the interview. Kandi admitted she was consistently putting on a brave face. And she states, with such stark clarity, "So all the times you've been seeing me online looking happy means nothing."
Wow. That quote is perhaps the most profoundly insightful statement about the psychological demands of being a celebrity in the social media era. The brave face isn't just a polite social gesture for her colleagues. It's a mandatory, perpetual performance for the millions of people who follow her life online and who, rely on her success as fuel for their own entertainment.
It's the pressure to maintain an image of seamless success, absolute stability, perpetual happiness. We're implicitly told that visible happiness is often the mandatory mask, a performance required to keep the engine of her brand running, masking deep internal difficulty and the fact that the marriage was brewing toward an end for a while.
And what she's doing is essentially confirming that the visual record of her life, provided via social media, is often aspirational or simply deceptive. She's telling the audience they should never just trust the happy photos.
And that forces us, the audience, to reevaluate every single smiling photo or joint appearance posted in the weeks or months leading up to this. She's telling us explicitly that the visual record of her happiness was invalid, yet it was mandatory for her to maintain the commercial viability of her persona.
It challenges the entire premise of celebrity transparency that her career was built on. If the ultimate reality star who showed us everything now admits her recent happiness was a performance, it just underscores the superficiality inherent in all celebrity branding.
It's the paradox of the parasocial relationship, isn't it? The audience feels they know Kandi and Todd so well that they believe they could detect genuine happiness or unhappiness. But Kandi is telling them, no, you were completely fooled.
And that sense of ownership from the audience stems directly from the reality television contract. When a celebrity shares their vulnerabilities, the audience feels this powerful, unearned intimacy, a parasocial relationship, which leads them to feel that they are entitled to the full scope of the narrative, especially during a crisis. So Kandi's quote, "All the times you've been seeing me online means nothing," is her reclaiming ownership of her internal emotional landscape from an audience who felt they had bought shares in it.
Which is why her summary of her recent internal struggles is so memorable and just so raw. "I've been going through it, child. I've been going through it. Life has been lifing me."
Life has been lifing me. It's a perfect, almost poetic encapsulation of that feeling. The feeling of being completely overwhelmed by messy, unexpected, and unscripted chaos. It's a momentary surrender.
It really is.
It's an acknowledgement that even someone with Kandi's level of fame and wealth and control, someone who usually dictates the narrative, is still susceptible to the random, unpredictable forces of personal fate. It grounds her experience in a universality that everyone can understand, regardless of their own net worth. The chaos of personal events just crashed violently into her meticulously organized public life.
And because she is such a public figure, the chaos doesn't remain private for long. She expressed very clear irritation over people on social media who are making their own narrative of what's going on.
And this is the inevitable, frustrating consequence of celebrity transparency, amplified by the digital age. Because she built her career on sharing, the public feels an explicit sense of ownership over her storyline. So when the concrete facts about the divorce are scarce, as they were right after the filing, that information vacuum is instantly filled. It's filled by hundreds of thousands of individual speculators, rumors, and often deeply incorrect hostile narratives formulated by external voices.
The cost of that celebrity transparency is just immense. When the pain is genuine, when the experience is complex and nuanced, she can't even define it for herself privately without facing instant contradiction, scrutiny, and false narratives from strangers online who claim to know the truth about what happened between her and Todd.
Her frustration is entirely justified. She's fighting for narrative control. She's trying to establish the authentic truth, that it was painful, that it was brewing, that she's up and down, that the children are okay, all against this tide of people trying to assign blame, fabricate betrayals, or just create drama for clicks.
It's the paradox, right? She needed privacy to process and grieve, but the public lack of information created the very vacuum and speculation that she finds so irritating. It almost required her to sacrifice a sliver of her desired privacy through the Amazon Live interview, just to correct the record and set a baseline narrative before the situation spun completely out of her control.
And by giving that interview, she walked right into that tension. She used a high-profile commercial platform to establish the real narrative, sacrificing a small amount of privacy to reclaim control over the rest of it and to combat the social media storm. It's a calculated, sophisticated, if utterly exhausting, navigation of a crisis that's required by her level of fame.
And despite all the immense emotional turbulence and the public pressure we discussed, the sources really emphasize a remarkably united and intentional front when it comes to their children. Kandi and Todd have 2 children together, their son Ace, who is 9, and their daughter Blaze, who is 6.
The fact that she made confirming the children are doing well a priority in her disclosure, it just speaks volumes about where their focus lies. In the midst of this extreme personal difficulty, the financial complications of the split, their number one priority remains demonstrating stability and security for young Ace and Blaze.
She stated it quite simply. She said that she and Tucker have been keeping it very friendly for their children's sake. What's the analysis here regarding that friendly energy, especially in the immediate aftermath of a divorce filing?
Well, I think we need to distinguish between an amicable divorce and a successful co-parenting relationship. An amicable divorce just means the legal split is less contentious. Successful co-parenting, which is what they are actively pursuing, requires sustained, intentional effort to compartmentalize their marital failure and create a functional, non-stressful environment for the children. Keeping it very friendly is the required, visible, and behavioral aspect of that goal.
And given the ages of the children, 6 and 9, any exposure to parental conflict could be very damaging. At 9, Ace is certainly old enough to understand the gravity of the situation, to worry about the security of his home, and to be highly sensitive to the emotional temperature of his parents. And a 6-year-old Blaze will react so strongly to any shift in routine or atmosphere.
Their developmental stages make stability and consistent parental modeling paramount. A 9-year-old needs verbal assurance, detailed explanations appropriate for his age, and visible proof that his parents are still a unified force in his life. A 6-year-old needs the physical demonstration of stability, seeing both parents together and happy in the same space. The parents have to demonstrate that even though their romantic relationship has ended, the family unit itself is structurally intact around the children.
So that friendly energy is the prerequisite.
It is. It's the prerequisite for minimizing disruption and ensuring the children feel safe, loved, and supported by both parents equally.
And we have 2 very concrete examples of this commitment, which I find genuinely remarkable considering the short time frame since the filing. First, she noted they had gotten along at a recent birthday bash for Blaze to support our baby girl.
That event, happening right after the emotional and legal filing, is a significant high-stakes test. Attending a child's birthday party together, putting smiles on their faces, and demonstrating unity in a public, photographed setting requires an enormous amount of emotional maturity, especially when the wounds are still so fresh. They're using that event not just as a celebration, but as a practical, visible application of their commitment to co-parenting harmony.
And they knew the public would be watching for signs of hostility.
Oh, absolutely. And they intentionally denied the public that satisfaction.
The second plan is even more immediate and specific, given the calendar. They confirmed they will be having Thanksgiving this week together so as to keep things normal for their children.
That intention is just so powerful, and it's incredibly difficult to execute. Thanksgiving is perhaps the most tradition-focused, family-centric holiday in American culture. To commit to maintaining a traditional family event immediately post-filing, potentially hosting it in a home that now feels divided, is the highest level of effort. It requires setting aside their own personal discomfort, their desire for space, their raw emotions, and instead deliberately prioritizing the children's routine and their sense of normalcy.
This shows that their commitment isn't just some vague statement in an interview. It's a series of extremely difficult, intentional actions. They are walking the walk of co-parenting, even if it hurts their own healing process, to sit across a Thanksgiving table from each other just days after legally dissolving their marriage. It screams functional unity. They are essentially communicating to the world, and more importantly to their children, that the foundational traditions of the family are not changing due to adult conflict. Their statement of intent: we're going to continue to keep that same good energy going for our kids, it is our goal, solidifies the fact that co-parenting is now their unified mission statement.
And that requires constant, detailed communication.
And a shared vision for the future, which honestly is often harder to maintain than the marriage itself.
So this whole high-stakes navigation grieving privately while maintaining a public performance of familial unity is exhausting, but it's absolutely necessary for public figures who want to protect their family structure from media speculation. They understand that while the cameras might be off the divorce proceedings, they are always always on their family life and how the children are reacting.
And by controlling the narrative around the children, by confirming they are doing well and highlighting these joint appearances, they are preempting and disarming speculation that the children are suffering or that the split is contentious. They are using their carefully managed public platform to reinforce the message: our kids come first, and we will protect their stability above all else.
So this deep dive has really explored the profound duality of Kandi Burruss's experience. On one hand, you have the professional necessity of the public eye. It compels her to be on Amazon Live, promoting her brand and speaking about her divorce. On the other hand, there is this deeply private struggle compounded by her determination, her Taurus nature, to protect her grief and maintain a united functional front for her children.
The sources really reveal a highly sophisticated navigation of a personal and professional crisis. Kandi's fame demands a performance of happiness, that brave face online. But her personal health demands privacy. And she is actively addressing this conflict, using deliberate strategies. Changing up her routine for distraction, setting firm boundaries against the social media narrative, and executing these concrete, selfless co-parenting plans, like attending Blaze's birthday and hosting Thanksgiving together.
I mean, this story is really a masterclass in trying to manage human messiness within the rigid framework of celebrity expectation.
I think so.
The story isn't just about a divorce document. It's about a celebrity trying to exit a life of mandatory transparency and claim sovereignty over her most painful moments. She's trying, after over a decade, to finally turn off the reality camera that has been documenting her life and her marriage for profit.
It is a remarkable effort, but it does raise a profound final consideration for you to ponder. Given how much control Kandi is attempting to exert over her private life now, how does the public persona she built during 11 years of marriage on reality television, the on-camera arguments, the wedding drama, the family disagreements, all captured for viewers, how does that ultimately shape the way her divorce is perceived?
That's a huge question. The viewers feel they saw the beginning, the middle, and everything in between. Can she truly reclaim the narrative of the ending, regardless of her current efforts?
I don't know. What do you think is the greatest challenge she faces in reconciling those two worlds? The Bravo-documented past, which is permanent, and the private, guarded present that she is so desperately trying to build.
That's something worth mulling over long after this deep dive concludes.
Indeed. The legacy of reality television is that the narrative often belongs permanently to the viewers, long after the stars wish to retire it and move on.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us on the deep dive. We'll see you next time.